Hello, hello. Hello, 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 hello. My name is Breezy, and welcome to the True Crime Lounge where we talk murder and other forms of crime. And I don't know why that piece of hair is sticking up like it is. Excuse me. Excuse me 1 second. Alright, now that we have that piece of hair situated, and the rest I don't really care about at the moment. But, this is the YouTube channel to my podcast, which you can find on Spotify and YouTube. I also have a Patreon that you can go and support as well as a merch shop if you would like. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Now, Twitter that you can check out and keep for any updates as well. Um, Now, since we got all that out of the way, why don't we dive into today's episode, shall we? Alright. So, on today's episode of True Crime Lounge, today we are going to be talking about the case of Jodi Arias, whom, if you might remember the Lifetime movie that came out about her, and the fact that her attorney released a book on her. Well, she, for those of you who don't know who she is a murderer known for the murder of Travis Alexander on June 4th, 2008. And Alexander was a salesman that was murdered in his home in Mesa, Arizona. His murder in a criminal trial received widespread media attention. His injuries were consistent with multiple stab wounds, a slit throat, and a shot in the head, resulting in a medical examiner ruling it a homicide. Arias was charged with the murder and would testify that she killed him in self-defense. Yeah. However, she was ultimately found guilty of first-degree murder, May 8, 2013. The case would go on to gain media attention from news media and was considered to be by many an example of trial by media and media circus. So, who was Travis Alexander? Well, Alexander was born Travis Victor Alexander, July 28, 1977, in Riverside, California. After his dad's death, he and his siblings were taken care of by their paternal grandmother, who eventually introduced him to Mormonism. He was a salesman for the multi-level marketing company Prepaid Legal Services and a motivational speaker. So along comes Jodi Arias. And who is she, you might ask? Well, she was born Jodi Ann Arias, July 9th, 1980. So we have a Gemini and a Leo. Ooh, no wonder these two didn't make it. Anyway, in Salinas, California. The two met in September 2006 at a conference that Travis was speaking at in Las Vegas. And on November 26, 2006, Arias was baptized into the Mormon Church by Alexander. As of February 2nd, 2007, Alexander and Arias were a couple. And after the two broke up on June 29, 2007, Arias was moved to Mesa, Arizona until April 2008, at which time she was moved to her grandparents' house in Eureka, California. Alexander's body was discovered in the shower in his throat had been cut. He had been shot in the head and stabbed multiple times. There had also been conflicting reports over the number of stab wounds. Some reports would state 29, some would state 27. The medical examiner, Dr. Kevin Horn, would testify that Alexander's jugular vein coming with a carotid artery and the windpipe had been slashed. Alexander's hands were in defensive wounds and further testified that Alexander may have been dead by the time his gunshot was inflicted. See, Alexander, he was actually scheduled for a trip to Cancun, and he had missed an important conference call on June 4th. So, June 9th, from the people from the company where he worked would go check on him after being unable to reach him. His roommate said that he was out of town, After searching, they have found the key in Alexander's master bedroom. When entering it, they noticed large pools of blood down the hall in the master bath, and his body was discovered in the shower. The 911 call they made notifying authorities of discovery mentioned an ex-girlfriend, Arias. Travis said that she was stalking him and hacking into his Facebook account, also slashing his tires. Sounds like she was cray-cray. On May 2nd, 2009, a burglary occurred at the residence of Arias' grandparents, with whom she had been living with in California. A 25 caliber gun and other objects were taken. The grandparents' gun was never recovered. The prosecutor argued that the burglary was staged by Arias and the stolen gun was used to shoot Alexander. Several days before the trip, Arias repeatedly contacted her ex-boyfriend Daryl Brewer asking to borrow 5-gallon gas cans for a trip to Arizona. The cans were not returned to Brewer. Receipts present at the trial also show that Arias had purchased a third 5-gallon gas can, sunblock, and facial cleanser from a Walmart in Salinas, California, on June 3rd, 2008. So, that evening at a gas station in Pasadena, California, she purchased 8.3 she purchased 8 gallons of gas with her debit card. 4 minutes later, she purchased 9 gallons with cash. Her card was used again on June 6th, 3 times at a gas station near Salt Lake City. But after his death, though, and before his body was discovered, she had continued to call him and leave several voicemails trying to get her alibi covered. Well, it was later alleged that she had accused Alexander's voice messages after his death, and that she said that he had originally planned to visit her in May 2008, but the plans had changed. On June 2nd, she had rented a Wright Ford in Redding, California. And why is this significant, you might ask? Well, because this was located 100 miles south of her residence, where she told Budget Rent-A-Car that she would be driving the car locally. However, that was not the case. When she returned, the car had been driven about 2,800 miles. It was also missing the floor mats that was located, and it looked like Kool-Aid stains on the front and the rear seats. The car cleaned before the people were able to examine it. A 25 caliber round was located near one of the sinks in his master bath. His damaged digital camera was located in the downstairs washing machine. This camera was new, so let's keep that in mind. So, the detective who interviewed Arias via phone asked her if she knew any possible motive for why somebody would want to damage his camera. And here's the interesting: images have been deleted, and Mesa County were able to recover the images. The recovered images included Arias and Alexander. The images were sexually suggestive, and the last photo was of Alexander alive, was in the shower taken about 5:30 p.m. on June 4th. Moments later, the images would appear as of an individual believed to be Alexander, who was bleeding on the floor. A bloody palm print was in the bathroom hallway, and this would have been DNA revealed to be a mixture of both Arias and Travis' DNA. She continued to insist that she had been last seen with Alexander on April 2008. Despite being present with DNA and photographic evidence by a detective. So Ryan Barnes and others who met Arias in Utah after the killing indicated she had bandages on her hand and she wore long sleeves on days when it was very hot. She told different stories about how she received the cuts and burns to her hands. Burns was told that they were from an injury while working at a Margaritaville restaurant, and after trial it was revealed by Siskiyou County, California authorities said that no such restaurant exists, nor ever existed in that area. Interesting. Well, at the time of the killing, she worked in Casas Ramos in Eureka. So, June 5th, 2008, in West Jordan, Utah, the police officer Michael Giletti pulled Arias over while she was in her vehicle, driving to a meeting with Barnes, and the front license plate of the window was missing. Front license plate of the car was missing, and the near plate was upside down. Arias attributed this to some kids at a Starbucks playing a trick on her. But Barnes helped Arias fix the license plate, and Giletti did not cite her for the infraction. She was indicted by a grand jury on first-degree murder July 9, 2008. She was arrested at her grandparents' home July 15, 2008. She was extradited to Arizona September 5, 2008, where she pled not guilty on September 11, 2008. Arias gave 3 accounts of her whereabouts. She originally told police that she had not been in the home at the time of Alexander's death. She later told police that 2 intruders had broken into Alexander's home and they murdered him and attacked her. Finally, she said that she killed Alexander in self-defense and she was a victim of domestic violence. Yeah. So, in March 2009, because of the expressed concerns about her possible violations of victim rights, by holding ex parte mitigation status conferences, it was ordered that the appointed mitigation master was relieved of further duties, with limited exceptions. In May 2009, the court could not determine whether IQ testing or competency screening had been previously ordered, so it was ordered that she submit IQ testing and that she should be tested for competence. In August 2009, Victoria Washington and Kirk Normey were appointed as defense counsel, replacing Maria Schaefer. And in September 2009, a defense motion to extend the last day beyond March 3, 2010 was denied. But in November 2009, another motion was granted after the state did not file a response, and the last days was set to be August 31, 2010. In April 2010, a motion to disqualify the Maricopa County's Attorney's Office was denied. And in 2010, after a ruling of the Arizona Rules of Criminal Procedure was amended, changing the last day of the capital cases from 18 to 24 months from being arraigned, and the state sought the death penalty. So, in January 2011, a defense filing detailed the efforts of Arias' attorney Went to obtain text messages and emails. Initially, prosecution told the defense attorneys that there were no available text messages or received by Alexander, and then was to turn over several hundred. The Mesa police detective Esteban Flores told the defense attorneys that there was nothing out of the ordinary among Alexander's emails. About 8,000 were turned over to the defense in June 2010. In March 2011, the court ruled that the Office of the Public Defender did not have a unilateral authority to dismantle a defense team. So, the trial would commence December 10, 2012, in Maricopa County Superior Court before Judge Sherry K. Stevens. And during the jury selection on December 20th, the defense would argue that the prosecution was systematically excluding women and African Americans. Prosecutor Juan Martinez said that race and sex were irrelevant to his decisions to strike certain jurors. Judge Stevens ruled that the prosecution had shown no bias in the jury selection. So what about the guilt phase? Well, in the opening statements, January 2nd, 2012, the prosecutor sought the death penalty, and Arias was represented by her appointed counsel, Kirk Normey and Jennifer Wilmot, and who argued that Alexander's death was justifiable homicide committed in self-defense. A man that visited Arias from Utah on June 5th said that she told him that she had cut her hands with a broken glass while working at a restaurant called Margaritaville. A detective would later testify that no restaurant by that name had ever existed in the Eureka area. And at that time, Arias was working at a restaurant called Casa Ramos, and later she would testify that after she cut her finger, she had a bazillion margaritas to make. So, the prosecution would also argue that since the .25 caliber round was found near Alexander's body, and that the week before the gun had the same caliber missing during the burglary of the Eureka home, that Arias lived with her grandparents, she had staged the burglary and used the gun to kill Alexander. Arias would take the stand in her own defense February 4th, 2013. Testifying for a total of 18 days, and the sheer length of time Arias spent on the stand was described as a criminal offense. Attorney Mark Garagos, and as a result, compiled by the Associated Press. Crime Cider staff is unprecedented. So on the first day of her 18-day testimony, she would tell of being violently abused by her parents beginning when she was the approximate age of 7. She would also testify that she rented a car from Redding because the budget website gave her two options, one up north and one to the south, and her brother lived in Redding. So, on her second day of the stand, she would say that her sex life included oral and anal. She also said that the anal sex was painful for her because she experienced it together, and it was considered oral sex and anal sex to be real sex. Alexander did not believe that these forms of sexual activity, or in contrast to vaginal sex, were technically not against the Mormon rules. So, she said that they eventually had vaginal sex, but less often. A phone sex tape was played in which Alexander said that he wanted to zip tie her up to a tree while she was dressed as Little Red Riding Hood, and she would testify that Alexander secretly found young boys and girls sexually attractive, and she tried to help him with these urges. Yeah. I know. So, she would also testify that her relationship with Alexander became increasingly physical and emotionally abusive, some of which caused his sisters to continuously roll their eyes and shake their head in disbelief. Arias said that Alexander shook her while saying, "I'm effing sick of you," and then began screaming at her, after which he body slammed her onto the floor at the foot of his bed and taunted her saying, "Don't act like that hurts," before he called her a witch, but I think you can imagine what I want to say, and kicked her in the ribs. Afterwards, she would go on to say that he would kick me again, and I put my hand out. Arias held up her left hand in the courtroom, showing that her ring finger had been crooked. According to Arias, the function of the relationship reached its climax when she killed Alexander in self-defense. After he became enraged following a day of sex and gun accident, while prosecutors and observers felt severely damaged, her credibility as a witness, a sentiment letter echoed by jurors upon the completion of the guilt phase. She addressed the comments she made in September 2008 in an interview, television interview that had been played, and she has said, "No jury is going to convict me because I am innocent. You can mark my word on that." Discussing the statement during her testimony, Arias said that at the time I had plans to commit suicide, so I was extremely confident that no jury would convict me because I didn't expect any of you to be here. As to close the cross-examination, Martinez replayed the video, prompting Arias to affirm that she had said during the interview that she had not been convicted because she was innocent. And at the end of the guilt phase, the juror foreman expressed his opinion to both the jury and the courtroom observers. And he said, "I think 18 days hurt her, but I also think she was not a good witness," he said. So, on March 14th, psychologist Richard Samuels testified for her defense for nearly 6 days, and he said that Arias was likely suffering from acute stress at the time of the killing, sending her body into fight-or-flight mode to defend herself, which would cause her brain to stop retaining memory. In response to a juror questioning asking whether the scenario occurred even if it was premeditated, as the prosecution contended, "Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No." Samuels diagnosed Arias with PTSD, and the prosecutor attacked Samuels' credibility, accusing him of forming a relationship with Arias and being biased. Samuels had previously testified that he had compassion for Arias. Beginning on March 26, a psychotherapist who specializes in domestic violence testified that Arias was a victim of domestic violence, and that most people don't tell anyone about abuse because they feel ashamed and humiliated. The psychotherapist would also summarize the emails from Alexandra's close friends, saying they basically advised Mr. Arias to move on from the relationship, and that Mr. Alexander had been abusive to women. So the jury posed nearly 160 questions. Clinical psychologist Jodi Ann Arias testified that for the prosecution that Arias did not suffer from PTSD or amnesia, and that she found no evidence that Alexander had abused her. Instead, she was said that Arias suffered from borderline personality disorder, showing signs of immaturity, unstable sense of identity. People who suffer from this disorder have a terrified feeling of being abandoned by others. So, April 24th, in response to a previous testimony given by Arias, was buying a 5-gallon gas can from Walmart in Salinas, California on June 3rd, 2008. That she returned the same day to her prosecution called Amanda Webb, a Walmart employee. Well, that employee said that she had reviewed all of the records for the store on June 3rd and found no service of 5-gallon, no return of 5-gallon buckets, in which she would record such being sold on that day. The final defense witness was psychologist Dr. Robert Scheffner, who said that the borderline personality diagnosis was not appropriate and that all tests was taken by Arias since her arrest toward her anxiety disorder stemming from trauma. He also said that the test indicated that she answered the questions honestly without lying. Following Jeffner's testimony, the state called Dr. Horn, who testified for her gunshot wound, by Dr. Jill Hayes, a forensic neuropsychologist, who disputed Jeffner's testimony that the MMPI test was not geared toward diagnosing borderline personality disorder, concluding the end of a long day. So the closing arguments that would occur Her defense team argued that the premeditation theory didn't make sense and that it was just happening and what happened in that moment in time. The relationship was in chaos and it ended in chaos as well. So after 18-day testimony, added to a very defense portion of the guilt phase of the trial, which led to problems in the retention of jury members, April 3rd, the defense asked for a mistrial, and the judge denied it. And on April 12th, another juror was accused of health reasons. The third juror was dismissed on April 25th and was arrested on DUI offenses. On May 8, 2013, after a 15-hour deliberation, Arias was found guilty of first-degree murder. Out of all 12 jurors, 5 found her guilty of first-degree premeditated. Another 7 found her guilty of both first-degree premeditated murder and felony murder. And as the guilty verdict was read, she struggled to repress tears as Alexander's family smiled and hugged each other. Several others have gathered around outside the courtroom and began celebrating by cheering and chanting. So, in the aggravation phase, following the first-degree murder conviction, the prosecution was required to convince the jury that the murders were cruel, heinous, and depraved in order for them to determine that she was eligible for the death penalty. In that phase, on March 5th, the only witness was the medical examiner who performed the autopsy, and her attorneys, who had repeatedly asked him to step down from the case, gave a brief opening statement during the closing arguments, in which they said the adrenaline rush through Alexander's body may have prevented him from feeling pain after his death. So in the penalty phase, which will begin May 16th, the prosecutor calls Alexander's family member to offer victim impact statements in an effort to convince the jury of she deserved a death sentence. March 24th, 2013, Arias offered an allocation, and where she pleaded a life sentence. And she acknowledged her plea for life was a reversal of remarks that she had made. And on March 23rd, the sentencing phase resulted in a hung jury, prompting the judge to declare a mistrial for that phase. And after the mistrial was declared, the jury was discharged, and the jury foreman stated that he believed Arias was mentally abused, but that had not been enough to accuse her of the crime. And he thinks 18. So, on May 30th, 2013, the DA, Bill Montgomery, discussed the next steps at a news conference. She would also go on to make appeals, as well. The Supreme Court declined her first appeal. But yeah. Alright, that's it for today's episode. I will see y'all next time. Y'all have a great day. And y'all have a happy Halloween.